Hello everyone and welcome back to the Plutonium Show. It seems like only yesterday, or 3 weeks ago to be exact, that Meghan Markle was frolicking around on the beach, dressed in all angelic white, giggling and laughing to herself as she welcomed 2025, the year that she was set to sparkle. Proving that 5 years post-Megxit, the Sussexes are as ridiculous as ever. Remember last week, amidst all the criticism that Meghan and Harry both received, I don't know why, I don't know what this is, okay? It's the Italian in me. Not long after that cringe, embarrassing display that would have most people asking their friends if they were okay, you know, you're just running around the beach by yourself laughing at your age. It's quite concerning. But because that wasn't a ridiculous enough display, they decided, as we covered last week, to show their faces and feign concern, all in an attempt to boost their PR and come across as humanitarians during the devastating LA fires. Now, we know that they both received immense criticism over that quite honestly disgusting display of fake humanitarianism. And if people are wondering why it's disgusting, I did say it towards the end of my episode last week, so naturally most people don't stick around that long. I'm not that interesting, but it's because they're doing it for show. I have no problem with them showing up and doing whatever it is they were doing, hugging or pretending to hand out pre-made food that they had no hand in. And thank God, I mean, look at the hair on that woman. Tie your hair up if you're handling food. Don't get me started on the trailer for her show. That it's stomach turning. But just don't call the cameras. Don't chase the cameras if you didn't call them. Don't do it just for the publicity. That was the point. You know, any help is better than no help, I suppose, but it really undermines the whole point if it's all about your publicity. That's what people are angry about. They're not saying don't help and don't show up. They're saying don't be, as we have all been calling them, disaster tourists or tragedy vultures or disaster vultures, whatever it is. But of course, in Meghan's signature style, she doubles down in the midst of this criticism and shows up at an Altadena girls charity or whatnot with bags, huge bags from a company that she actually previously collaborated with called Our Place. And this is per Harper's Bazaar, which is infamously a Meghan Markle mouthpiece. So we can, you know, take it as truth. Merching. In my opinion, shamelessly merching. She couldn't help herself. She couldn't get bags that didn't have a logo on them or a label, or maybe from a company that she didn't ever collaborate with, like Whole Foods or something. No, it had to be a merching opportunity, like right there with the huge letters. And I don't even know what she was donating, but I'm fairly certain it's not money. I've been doing, you know, frequent research to see any updates. Have you guys done what actually counts in this disaster? Because I've been hearing people are being turned away, you know, if they're donating clothing and all that, because these people who have been displaced and who've lost their homes, they don't have place to store all these things. It's not that they're not grateful. They just, where are they going to put all of it? They need money. And not everyone is able to cut a check. Not everyone lives in a 16 bathroom mansion as Meghan and Harry do. Not everyone has a royal title as Meghan and Harry do. Not everyone has multi-million dollar deals as Meghan and Harry do. So Meghan and Harry should put their money where their mouth is and do what actually counts instead of urging others to donate shamelessly on their Archwell Foundation website. Perhaps they should do it themselves. Now, their supporters might argue, how do you know they haven't? They may have done it anonymously. Hello? Have you ever, well, I suppose I can't say met them, but do you know anything about Meghan and Harry? The term anonymous doesn't exist in their vocabulary. The point is to virtue signal. The point is to show off and publicize every little good deed that they do. You know, show up, do good. All they ever do is show up. But I also wanted to cover one question that I've been receiving, a legal question about their touring, you know, the disaster tours of people's burned down homes. Is that trespassing according to California law? Now, a lot of you know I'm an Australian-based lawyer. I studied in Australia, and I don't really know much about foreign law. I do have to look into it and research it. But from what I found, to be convicted or even charged of trespass, you have to enter someone's property with a specific intention to do something wrong. So, for instance, you want to steal, you know, or you want to place illegal surveillance, whatever it is. And trespass also occurs when someone, you know, the owner catches you in their property and you refuse to leave. That's also trespass, or you've occupied it as well. So you've basically squatted there. But being taken around by government officials without a specific intent to do something on someone's land does not qualify as trespass. I hope that answers your questions. Of course, feel free to shoot more questions if you would like more clarification. In other news, we all know, I'm sure, if you don't know, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta has come out recently in the midst of Trump taking over as president, declaring that all this fact checking and, you know, all the censorship on Facebook and on Meta was counterproductive to freedom of speech. Wouldn't you know it? I mean, welcome to the club, Mr. Zuckerberg. It's not like we all haven't been saying this for the past decade. But look, it's good to see these incredibly powerful people come out and say these things because, of course, you know, they go wherever the power goes. So now because Trump's in office, they're going to go that direction. We are very pro-speech on this channel. I ain't complaining, but Meghan and Harry are. And they made sure that the rest of us could read their complaint, their grievances, in another statement on their Farcewell website that nobody asked for. Someone needs to tell these people, you're not representing anyone. You are not official government diplomats. You are no longer working royals. All these statements that they were releasing through Buckingham Palace and Kensington, it's not how things work anymore for you, okay? You quit. And if you wanted things to work that way for you, well, perhaps you should have thought twice before going along with your racism, you know, storyline that was very quickly debunked, mind you, and that you yourselves have backed away from since. But, you know, thinking things through, that's really not in the agenda for the likes of Meghan and Harry. But this statement is a joke. Now, last week they released a statement about the fires, which I refuse to even acknowledge. I refuse to even read it. But this one I just had to share with you. That I don't even know if it's tone deafness. I really think Meghan knows exactly what she's doing. Harry's not, you know, the sharpest tool in the shed. But this is beyond, as I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, nothing Meghan does is actually tone deaf. Everything is deliberate. She does things because she's a contrarian and because she wants to elicit specific feelings out of the public, mostly negative. I really think she courts the negativity. She pretends on the one hand that, oh, I'm a victim of this, I'm a victim of that. But at the same time, there's this kind of malady that I think she has. I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not a doctor, where she needs to elicit a negative reaction out of people. It's like it satisfies her. And that seems to be a very common affliction with narcissists, actually. Now, when I say narcissists, I don't necessarily mean NPD. I know a lot of people hate that armchair psychology, but just in general, people who have that personality type tend to like to elicit outrage for some reason. It doesn't make sense. But these two have the audacity, because Harry calling the First Amendment bonkers wasn't enough, to come out and actually say that Meta's changes of removing fact-checking and, you know, all these restrictions on speech directly undermine free speech. And this should deeply concern us all. They say, contrary to the company's talking points, allowing more abuse and normalizing hate speech serves to silence speech and expression, not foster it. Really, the way you like to silence speech and expression when you give people NDAs, all your staff, as we know from the Vanity Fair article, which of course we will get to, they're made to sign NDAs, even though you bragged, Meghan, in the Cut article that I never signed anything. I could say something whenever I want. You know, remember the blackmail? Not to mention the children. I believe it was at the Harlem school that you visited in 2021. You made the school and the kids, you know, presumably their parents, and the staff sign NDAs that they could never say anything negative about you? How's that for stifling or undermining freedom of speech? I'm telling you, the hypocrisy. It's palpable. You can slice through it. I can almost feel it. They go on, and honestly, it's just a bunch of word vomit, but they pretend that they have some kind of power. They say, we urge Meta to reconsider and reinstate policies to protect all users. We also call on leaders across industries to uphold their commitments to integrity and public safety in online spaces. And we applaud leaders who refuse to kowtow to bullying. Really? So clearly you can't applaud yourselves because you obviously seem to think you're leaders of some sort. And I think we can all reluctantly agree that you are leaders to a very small group of deranged individuals known as the Sussex Squad. They've got your name in their little moniker, whatever. And they are known as some of the most profound bullying terrorists on the internet today and in recent times. I suppose your concerns don't extend to them and their behavior. And I suppose bullying your staff, allegedly, more of that to come, isn't considered as abusive. The double standards. Who protected your staff? That you allegedly bullied to therapy, long-term therapy, quitting, and integrity, really. These liars, these proven liars. This is why I had to read this out this time. It is something else. This is beyond tone deafness. Do you see what I mean? This is willful. And then, of course, they talk about how they continue to act, really. Because so far we have no idea what you guys actually do other than slapping your name on other causes that are being carried by other organizations. Oh, we've partnered with them. Yeah, you mean you've slapped your name onto the backdrop and you showed up dressed to the nines as you talked about a topic that you have no idea, you know, what you're talking about, basically. That was a very bad sentence, but at least I can admit it. And they list, here they do it literally in the statement. We proudly support organizations such as, and they list a whole bunch. Yeah. Support how? Let us know how. Do you remember the interview with, was it Jane Pauley was her name? Last August about the Parents Initiative that they created. And when they were asked to talk about what they do, they literally had no idea. They fumbled. Meghan in particular was just stumbling over her words. Oh, well, from my perspective, I just saw how the parents were able to bond. Really? Pretty sure that doesn't answer the question. And then finally, the cherry on top of this rotten cake, they say, having worked in this space for the last 5 years and witnessing the real world devastation these decisions have, we feel there is no justification for why this industry behaves as if they are exempt from the ethical and moral standards everyone else abides by. Everyone else but you. How rich of you, forgive the pun, to even mention ethics and morals when you both have demonstrated over these past 5 years that you've referenced you don't possess. You both wouldn't know what morals or ethics were if they smacked you right in the face. Just a quick ad break before we get into the Vanity Fair article. Don't forget, everyone, that you can get a 40% discount over our friends, our partners at Ground News, which is an independent organization that gives you access to unbiased and transparent news. Head over on to check.ground.news/lostbeyondpluto for 40% off a Vantage plan. And I hope you use it, because I certainly do, and I certainly use it in my research for my content, and it's proven to be incredibly helpful. And link in the description box. The Vanity Fair article, right off the bat, can I just say, it's a head scratcher to me how this is apparently just setting the entire mediascape on fire, as if anything in this, apart from the Netflix contract deal figure, was a revelation of sorts, as if we haven't been saying all these things for the last 5 years. It's really interesting to me how, unfortunately, content creators are still not taken seriously, and the mainstream media has quite a bit of power left in terms of making waves. You know, because people dismiss channels like mine. They go, who are you? Well, I reference the media. That's the irony. We all reference, I shouldn't say all, I know some people invent things, but most of us do our due diligence and we reference the headlines, but then they're still not believed. And then comes in a publication like Vanity Fair, which has been defending Meghan over the last few years. Maybe this is their mea culpa. But when they say it suddenly, oh, it's the Sussexes' downfall, it's over for them. They've been going through a downfall for the last 4 years. Ever since that Oprah interview. That was the beginning of their downfall. Probably even earlier, but as far as the public's concerned, it's been happening for a while. It just seems like a hit piece that was peppered with fangirling, I suppose. Fangirling, yeah. I guess to soften the blow, to make sure they don't get sued, because Meghan and Harry are notoriously litigious. I don't know. By the way, I think a giveaway that obviously Meghan and Harry were not in cahoots with Vanity Fair over this is that they declined to be interviewed for this article. They declined to say anything. So it is called Inside Prince Harry and Meghan's Big Business Ambitions, 5 years after their royal exit. Ensconced in their cozy Montecito mansion, the Sussexes are living the American dream. By all accounts, the love is real. But their foray into moguldom has not always been a smooth ride. I want to tell you right off the bat, obviously, you know my style, I don't read through articles, I just read excerpts. It reminded me of The Cut from almost, 2.5 years ago now. That Cut article, which initially people were outraged by, and then you read it again, or even for some of us upon first read, you go, I sense a very heavy dose of sarcasm, of irony in this article. Even when it's being sickly sweet towards Meghan and Harry, you get the sense that the author is almost being satirical about it, which I think some people may have not read the whole article, because initially there was this whole outrage that this was a love letter to Meghan and Harry, or it was too easy on them. I think in some areas, maybe they were too easy on them, but honestly, when you read it, the irony is dripping. For instance, listen to this line. Going from divinely chosen, or at least chosen by someone else who was divinely chosen, members of a 1,200-year-old institution to startup founders in exile is a tough adjustment. So that's just a sample. There is more we're going to get through of what you can expect out of this article. I mentioned earlier there was one revelation that their Netflix deal, according to a Netflix insider, on the record, they stated that it is not the reported $100 million that we all quote, because that's what has been reported. Don't know if it's a lower amount. The individual refused to disclose because it goes against Netflix's policies. But it made me remember how Meghan, especially in the beginning, when she was a brand new nobody, would leak things that she thought no one would fact check her, because she's gone through this her whole life. She was a nobody before Harry, and she always lied. She literally lied about being Maltese to get a free trip to Malta. She is a liar. But because she was a nobody, no one fact-checked her. She wasn't important. And when you're a nobody, it's hard to fact-check unless you go and find her people who actually know her in real life. But she didn't really have much of an online presence apart from what she willingly put out there, primarily through the TIG and her Instagram. But I remember when there were headlines that she was slated to be the next Bond girl. That was a lie. So it made me wonder whether perhaps they weren't offered 100 and they were offered less, 100 million, and that Meghan just put that out there. It's also when we started getting rumors about her rejoining Instagram a couple of years ago, we kept hearing that she is slated to make $1 million per post. Based on what? What are you basing that number on? It was just put out there by Meghan, manifesting, showing off. The Dior deal that never existed. So yeah, just an interesting little tidbit here. The Spotify development process was challenging to work with them. Basically, they didn't know what they wanted, and they had all these big, grand ideas, but no substance. Just a shell, But it's like, imagine the tip of the iceberg, but there's literally no iceberg underneath. Which is something we've all been saying. I don't think we need to interview people to ascertain that. I mean, obviously, it's always good to back up your assumptions and conclusions with solid, concrete evidence. I'm not, denying the importance of that, but it's nothing revelatory. It's very obvious that they just want to be seen a certain way, but they have no substance and no idea as to how they're going to achieve that vision. And, with someone like Harry, I'd imagine he's used to it. Like with Invictus Games. He went to the States, saw the Warrior Games, I think they're called, came back and went, I want that. Literally just, I want that concept. And they made it happen for him. Now, what's funny is they balanced that by a fangirl saying, oh no, but they had good projects on Spotify. We just never made it known to the public. Have you met Meghan Markle? She's a leaking ship. She's the personification of a leaking ship. If there were ever any good ideas that were not considered by the executives, we would have heard about it. I think so, at least. Especially when the deal was canceled. They would have come out and said, we had all this and we were turned down. Meghan's vindictive. It's what she lives for. She lives for that battle, almost. And then we learn, and I wonder if this is the idea that Bill Simmons was referencing when he called them effing grifters, and he was like, wait till I have to get drunk to tell you what Harry wanted to do. Harry's idea for a sociopath podcast. Literally, he wanted to get people on like Mark Zuckerberg, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and talk to them about their childhood and how that made them a sociopath. I had to read that paragraph twice because I couldn't digest the words. I couldn't make sense. And of course, obviously Spotify felt the same way. They had to very politely tell him, it's kind of going to be difficult to book under that premise. And what's funny also is he wanted to ask, I don't know why these guys became sociopaths. I've been through some really hard stuff. I lost my mom. Why didn't I become a bad guy? I mean, first of all, Harry, I think some people would beg to differ. You're not exactly a good person with what you've allowed your wife to do and what you've participated in willingly. But second of all, I don't know, maybe ask your wife. If we're going to talk about, sociopaths, that's certainly how she behaves if she's not actually one. I actually think she would have been a prime candidate as your perhaps even first interviewee for this podcast. Ask her, what happened in your childhood to make you the way you are today? Missed opportunity. Spotify, you may want to reconsider. But the last thing I want to say about this is it feels like this person who is pro Sussex says, it feels like the only story is they didn't satisfy their contract. It's not like the work wasn't being done. Lady, the contract was canceled after one podcast, 2.5 years after being signed Wait, not 2.5 years. Yeah, no, I think it was 2.5 years. Whatever it was a long time. Let's say 2 years. I think that says it all. Of course, we cannot talk about this article without focusing on the bullying allegations, what it's like to work with Meghan. Right off the bat, people are saying that Harry is actually really pleasant, really charming. He's a doofus. For example, he had no idea. He seemed to have no idea the impact that Spare would have on his relationship with his family. Like literally, he was like, yeah, I'm sure, we're cool, right? Like, I hope they reach out. Is he actually that dumb, or I don't know. But that's pretty much, most of the negativity against Harry. He's not, as we all know, not the sharpest tool in the shed. But with Meghan, now we learn actually that she was a chicken who really watered down archetypes. It was meant to be more of an in-your-face podcast. We all know she couldn't even say the word bitch. One person said it felt like very women's and gender studies 101 taught in 2003. Exactly. It was such a snore fest. It was the most boring thing I ever had to tune into other than their documentary Live to Lead. But here's what they say about her, I suppose, boss style, her girl boss mode. She starts off, as we always knew, with this really friendly fake mask. This friendly persona, luring you in, false sense of security, letting your guard down. I've dealt with people like her in real life. This is how they all operate without fail. And then, once they've got you in, the mask slips and the monster is revealed. The bullying allegations in the UK were interestingly confirmed by a former employee going, first when I read the allegations, I didn't believe them. And then after I worked with her, quote, oh, any given Tuesday, this happened. The bullying. People quit. Some took prolonged absences of leave. And some even had to seek long-term therapy. The beauty of a podcast is it's not edited, so you get to see all my slip-ups. Long-term therapy. Sounds awfully familiar to what was happening across the pond, doesn't it? Sounds awfully familiar also to the Hollywood Reporter article from late last year. Another employee says, former employee, you don't tell them no. And this employee left because they just couldn't live with themselves anymore. This is just, to us, almost par for the course. It's so sad to even say that. But we've been hearing this now for years. And we've been saying it for years. And we've been called racist, jealous hags. But when Vanity Fair says it, suddenly there's gravitas. Or when American employees say it, suddenly there's gravitas. And the UK employees are called liars. So am I surprised? Absolutely not. Am I relieved to see that there's some sort of, I don't even know if it's justice, because I really don't think this woman will ever face the consequences of her alleged bullying. Yes, I still have to say alleged, unfortunately, but hasn't been proven. She's never going to face the consequences, but she really cares about her reputation. And this is no bueno for her reputation. Now, what's annoying, though, is this balancing act they're trying to play, because these are explosive allegations. But unlike the Hollywood Reporter, Vanity Fair is like, I guess we should just, soften the blow, as I said earlier. Pepper in those little flowers, just to make things look pretty, the way Meghan likes to put flowers in her ice cubes. They say this ridiculous thing where basically they're, and I don't know if this is irony, it could still be ironic, but they basically write that Meghan's behavior is because she was lonely when she was a kid and she has a difficult childhood. And it's this mask she basically puts on to cover her hurt from, that little girl who used to not have anyone to sit with at lunch. She probably stole that from a scene in Mean Girls. If you remember, Katie Heron would, had her first lunch in a toilet cubicle. But that's what Meghan has been saying. And quote here, it says, Meghan was a good person trying to do good. Trying to do good things in spite of, and at times because of, unkind people. So you see what I mean? I really hope that this is also said with some degree of irony, because if this was meant in earnest, wow. Wow. I mean, talk about excusing toxic behavior. We get into a part where it is so on brand, and if the article started off like this, or if it only contained information, if it only contained statements like this, I would have thought this is straight from Meghan and Harry. They are so hot for each other. What the F? Are we talking about a couple of 15-year-olds here, or two parents in their early to mid 40s? It's sickening how not just the media, because I understand Vanity Fair is quoting people, but how people infantilize them. I remember everyone saying, oh, this young couple, Hillary Clinton going, this young woman, when Meghan was 40 or 41. I'm not trying to be ageist here, but yes, 40 is young in the grand scheme of things, but to say they're a young couple, young parents, what does that mean if you're in your 20s or even teen parents? What are they, embryonic? Are they just embryos? No one cuts me some slack because I'm young. No one ever did, even when I was in my early 20s. Where's the slack that everyone keeps cutting for celebrities? Why don't we get a piece? No wonder they behave that way. Then, of course, they bring up Diana. And look, it's the usual, oh, Harry's comparing. Oh, I don't want Meghan to face the same fate as my mother, which is what he believes might happen. But there's this quote here where someone says, it kind of feels like she's reparenting him in a way. And they're saying, look, I'm not trying to say it's like some Oedipus complex. And I'm just like, buddy, just go ahead and say it. Come out and say it for what it is, because we've all been saying it for years. It is absolutely some kind of sick Oedipus complex. She has taken on the personality, or tried to, of his dead mother. There's a rumor that she sprayed his dead mother's favorite perfume on their first date. And he's just lapping it up. I mean, she's even dressing like her. And he's buying it. And you know he's buying it because it's all he ever says. He's convinced. So it kind of is a sick Oedipus thing. Just putting it out there. But it's so funny. This is where I'm like, you get whiplash. So you hear that, or you read rather that, they're so hot for each other. When you're with them in the room, you kind of feel like you shouldn't be there. And I'm like, okay, maybe they're not behaving appropriately. If you feel that way around a couple, perhaps the couple is doing things to make you feel that way. And I wouldn't be surprised. Meghan and Harry, and we've seen all their inappropriate hand-holding throughout the years. But then you hear that she's... I suppose this is a revelation that we've all been suspicious of, but this is, they're putting it in writing. She's been shopping around for a divorce book deal. And this part is written in a very tongue-in-cheek way. Let me just find it here in the article. So they say, this book, this notion of a book really, might center on a post-Harry divorce. Not that there was actually one in the works. Just if this a priori divorce ever came to be, would this publisher theoretically be interested in a book that took place in its aftermath? So you see how it's dripping with sarcasm? Are we surprised that this is true? Of course, there's a denial, by the way, right down there. It says, another source with knowledge says, look, if this is true, she'd be approached. There's no way she'd go do the approaching. Excuse me. Meghan Markle, by her own admission, is someone who chases people down and cold calls. It's what she does. It's in her DNA. She did it before she met Harry with the Tig. She talked about it in an interview that I can't find now for the life of me anymore. It was some kind of a conference in 2016 that she did, and she was flaunting Harry's, that identical bracelet she had. But she talked about how with the Tig, she would chase down, Heidi Klum's assistant, Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, she was persistent, as we know she is.
This blind outreach again, it's like a numbers game. It's no different than auditioning, right? Like at a certain point, someone will say yes. So it was the same thing with the TIG. But I just kept putting out outreach, and I was writing a lot of personal emails. I just was blindly emailing one person after another to get Heidi Klum's assistant's email to be like, hi, can I interview her for my website? And so I think it's really just that. It's just like putting out more and more feelers until you get what you want.
And even after, when she started involving herself in politics in the US, cold calling senators, it's right down her alley or up her alley or left, right, whatever it is, whatever direction of her alley, it's in her alley. This behavior of seeking deals as opposed to waiting for people to come to her. That's just not her style. What else do we have here? I do need to wrap this up. I really want to get to an update on the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively case towards the end. Just some more drivel about how they mean well. They're just doing it their way. They also mention how they're basically the villains of Montecito. It echoes what that British neighbor said in the German documentary. They really aren't involved. If anything, they've just brought the prices up. They've brought in paparazzi, and they've ruined what peace and quiet the neighborhood once enjoyed. Granted, this seems to be coming from one particular neighbor who seems to really have a bone to pick with them and doesn't like them. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same British dude. But one of them even said this, and this is about American Riviera Orchard. They said, it's just finding every way she can to monetize something. And in doing so, bringing more attention to the place where they say they want to be left alone. And this is in reference to naming American Riviera Orchard as like not an ode, but in honor of Montecito. And so they're, the Montecitans are very annoyed by that. And they continue to say, I still think they're the most entitled, disingenuous people on the planet. This is their neighbor. They moved away from England to get away from the security of the press, and all they do is try and get in the press in the United States. You see? We've all been saying it for years. Even their neighbors think so. I guess their neighbors are racist and jealous and misogynistic and all the other labels that get slapped on us for calling out the BS. Speaking of American Riviera Orchard, or as I like to call it, American Racism Orchestra, it is obviously briefly touched upon. You can't do an article on Meghan without touching on that. But they briefly say, oh, it's in trademark limbo. But then someone from their inner circle has to come and soften that blow and say, but Meghan is a hard worker. American Riviera Orchard will be a success. Quote, there'll be no way that you can say that it wasn't successful. I'm pretty sure it was first announced almost a year ago. The Instagram account is dead in the water, 0 products and services, and no trademark. Pretty sure that qualifies as unsuccessful. Finally, we touch upon something I actually referenced earlier, and a former employee echoes the same sentiment, which is, I'll just quote them. They say, I think that they, being Meghan and Harry, don't know what change the world means. And this person worked in media projects with them. They want to be people who are looked at as people who want to change the world. And that is just spot on. It is exactly what they want. This image with no substance behind it. Kudos to Vanity Fair for bringing up the dishwashing commercial. They say, perhaps that's why she keeps bringing up that bloody dishwashing soap commercial from all the way back when she was 12 years old in 1993. A story which, by the way, Vanity Fair says Procter & Gamble, who were, the company that owned that dishwashing liquid, refused to confirm or deny, even though they've worked with her since, by the way. Quote, whether or not Meghan's letter is what prompted the change, the fact that more than 30 years later she continues to speak up about having spoken up suggests it's the kind of mission she aspires to. Bravo, Vanity Fair. Bravo. That is exactly it. She's all talk and absolutely zero walk. And to end it off, this quote, another cherry, I suppose, on this rotten cake. Diana walked among landmines. Meghan couldn't even say slut. And there you have it. The article that's been causing a storm in the media lately. As I said in the beginning, to me, it's nothing new, but there is talk from other news reporters, commentators, that this was a piece of revenge from Vanity Fair. Because if you remember, 7.5 years ago, they released that infamous Wild About Harry cover story. We know how dreadfully she treated the interviewer who interviewed her for that article, who came to her house, by the way. Tom Bauer spoke to him, and his account is included in Revenge. She even mocked his stutter. The interviewer apparently had a stutter. And she, in a very classic Regina George mean girl way, went, "Oh, you have a stutter? So cute." You know? That backhanded, dare I say, bitchy way of making someone feel small. So yeah, was it revenge? Was it revenge for accusing them of racism? If you remember, Meghan Markle, and we learned this, I suppose, from Tom Bauer, raged at Vanity Fair's cover, the Wild About Harry cover, saying that it was racist because Judy Garland song, "I'm Just Wild About Harry," used blackface dancers in 1939. So we're going to completely ignore the fact that you were clearly referencing the cover story for when Prince Harry was born. Wild About Harry. No one on this planet can convince me that that wasn't what Meghan wanted. That parallel with Diana, sharing a cover story as Diana had with the exact same headline. No one on this planet can convince me otherwise. That wasn't deliberate on Meghan's part, or at least given with her blessing. So, if it is revenge, I suppose bravo, Vanity Fair. Honestly, to me, it's just not revelatory enough. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's what we've all been saying. So I suppose I don't see it as a hit piece per se. You know, do you know what I mean? I feel like the Hollywood Reporter was more of a confirmation of the bullying allegations from across the pond, and this is just more confirmation of what we already knew. And mind you, just so you know, Meghan wasn't meant to even talk about Harry. We covered this actually like 2.5 years ago when I read Revenge. She wasn't even allowed to talk about him in that interview. And she went straight there right off the bat. And then when her PR specialists were complaining about how, because she lied and said, "Oh, I was conned. You know, he tricked me. The interviewer tricked me and he led me down that path." Meghan threatened that the Queen would be unleashed if they didn't change it. But that's because she was, I suppose, shocked at the fury of the palace, because she went behind their back and, you know, did what she does, just going against advice and even orders, perhaps. And so she turned into a little crybaby and said, "Oh, they made me do it because they're racist." In any event, let me know what you think. Was this a piece of revenge? You know, they say revenge is a dish best served cold, right? Or do you think otherwise? Finally, before we wrap up this episode, we have an update on the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni saga, I suppose. I mentioned in a video where I analyzed the evidence from both sides a couple of weeks ago that Justin was going to file yet another lawsuit, this time against Blake, Ryan, and Leslie Sloan, her PR agent, as opposed to the New York Times, which is the first defendant, or rather the defendant in the first case. But I'm going to do a separate video analyzing this court filing, the complaint. However, as someone who watched Deadpool, I found it very interesting that Marvel is actually being dragged into this whole, issue by their lawyer, Justin Baldoni's legal team, basically asked Marvel and Disney to preserve evidence that is relevant to the character in the movie called Nice Pool. This was a very feminist kind of woke DEI, version of Deadpool complete with a man bun, which Justin Baldoni used to actually sport in recent years. And there were a couple of lines where you can see how the argument leans towards Deadpool, the movie, or Ryan Reynolds mocking Baldoni. For instance, there are lines where he says, "Where in God's name is the intimacy coordinator?" And when he's called out for his misogyny, he says, "It's okay, I identify as a feminist." Little things like that. They're arguing that this was clearly a dig at Justin Baldoni. Now, in terms of the point of this argument, from what I remember reading, they're arguing, well, if Blake, your wife, Ryan, was actually harassed in the manner that she alleges, which is quite serious, one would think you wouldn't poke fun at it. One would think you would actually take it very seriously and pursue the right channels, the right legal channels, as opposed to making fun of Justin, the alleged perpetrator against your wife in your movie. So that's, I suppose, the angle that they want to take with this. There's probably more to it. I haven't finished reading the lawsuit, but it's interesting because I've seen the movie and I really like the Deadpool franchise, by the way. So I didn't know who Justin Baldoni was before all this. So obviously it's not like I would know if there were any parallels. I just found Nice Pool hilarious. The character, I just found him hilarious. I thought it was a dig at, all this wokeness going on in the world, but it may have been a dig at just the one person. I think that's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do let me think what you think. Let me think? Please let me think. Please do let me know what you think, what your thoughts are on the Vanity Fair article, and even on the whole statement on Meta about undermining free speech, that whole hypocrisy, showing up and merching our place, all that. Always interested in hearing your thoughts. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.